You won't believe what happened at Ozzy Osbourne's funeral, and it all started with 3 words Sharon whispered to Kelly that changed everything. 3 words that nearly canceled the entire public procession. 3 words that revealed a secret so devastating, Sharon had planned to take it to her grave. July 30th, 2025 was supposed to be Birmingham's farewell to the Prince of Darkness, but what nobody knew was that just hours before the procession began, Sharon Osbourne was sitting in her hotel room, phone in hand, ready to call the whole thing off. The woman who had managed every detail of Ozzy's career for 4 decades, who had fought record labels, promoters, and even her own children to protect his legacy, was about to deny 50,000 fans their final goodbye. Why? Because of what she discovered in Ozzy's personal effects just 3 days earlier. While going through his belongings to prepare for the funeral, Sharon found something that shattered everything she thought she knew about their marriage.
I met Ozzy when I was around 18, and he came into my father's office for management with Black Sabbath. So I was 18 when I first met him.
Love at first sight?
No, not at all.
Hidden in a locked drawer of his home studio desk was a collection of handwritten letters. Not fan mail, not business correspondence. Love letters, dozens of them, all addressed to the same person. All signed, "Forever yours, John Michael." But here's the part that destroyed Sharon completely. These weren't letters to another woman. They were letters to his first wife, Thelma Riley. Letters he had been writing for over 20 years, never sent, never shared, expressing regret, love, and a longing that Sharon never knew existed. The most recent letter was dated just 2 weeks before Ozzy's death. In his shaking handwriting, clearly struggling with his Parkinson's, he had written, "Thelma, I know I hurt you beyond forgiveness, but not a day passes that I don't wonder what our life could have been."
To keep me alive. But Sharon, that woman who supported my messy life, she knew how terrible I was when I was young. She should have dumped me countless times.
Sharon gave me everything, but you gave me my soul. I'm dying knowing I failed the only woman who loved me before the world knew my name. Sharon told Kelly she felt like their entire marriage was built on a lie. 43 years together, and she was just discovering that Ozzy's heart had never fully belonged to her. She couldn't face 50,000 people celebrating a love story that, in her mind, had been a fraud from the beginning. Kelly begged her mother to reconsider. "Dad chose you," she kept saying. "He stayed with you, he built a life with you." But Sharon's response was what nearly ended everything. "He settled for me because he thought he wasn't good enough for her." The breaking point came when Sharon read the final letter aloud to Kelly. Ozzy had written, "I see you sometimes in Sharon's eyes when she's fighting for me, the way you used to fight for us. I married her hoping I could love her the way I loved you, but some hearts only break once, and mine broke when I lost you." Kelly was in tears. Sharon was beyond tears. She was in that dangerous place where grief turns into rage. She started making calls to cancel everything. The procession, the memorial, even the private service. She told the Birmingham City Council that the family had changed their minds, that it was too soon, too public, too much. But then something happened that saved the entire day. Jack Osbourne showed up at the hotel room with someone Sharon hadn't seen in over 30 years. Thelma Riley herself, now Thelma Maida, had flown in from Leicestershire after hearing about the funeral plans. She was 76 years old, widowed, and carrying her own secrets about her relationship with the man the world knew as Ozzy Osbourne. Thelma sat with Sharon for 2 hours that morning while 50,000 fans gathered in the streets below, not knowing that their tribute was hanging by a thread. What Thelma told Sharon changed everything. She revealed that Ozzy had indeed been writing to her for decades, but she had been writing back. Secret correspondence that started in the early 2000s when Ozzy was struggling with his addictions and Sharon was fighting cancer. Thelma had been counseling Ozzy through letters, helping him work through the guilt he carried about their divorce, about the children he'd left behind, about the man he'd become. "Sharon," Thelma said, "those letters weren't about wanting me back. They were about him trying to forgive himself so he could love you completely. I was helping him heal so he could be the husband you deserved. Every letter he wrote to me was really a love letter to you." The twist that saved everything. Thelma showed Sharon the responses she had written to Ozzy. Letter after letter encouraging him to appreciate Sharon, to recognize her strength, to understand that his guilt was preventing him from being fully present in his marriage. Thelma had spent 20 years convincing Ozzy that Sharon was his soulmate, not her. Sharon whispered to Kelly, "She saved us." Those 3 words that almost canceled everything instead became the 3 words that made everything possible. But this revelation split the Osbourne family in ways no one expected, because now they had to decide. Would they tell the world that Ozzy's funeral procession almost didn't happen because of a love story that was more complicated than anyone imagined?
I'm dying. It's a fact. There's no need for a doctor to tell me. That farewell performance was something I insisted on doing.
What happened during that funeral procession wasn't just a tribute to the Prince of Darkness. It became the most shocking revelation of who John Michael Osbourne really was behind the makeup and madness. 50,000 fans thought they were saying goodbye to a rock legend, but instead they discovered a man so different from his public image that even his own family was learning things they never knew. It started when the procession passed through Aston, Ozzy's childhood neighborhood. Fans expecting to see the rough, working-class streets that forged the godfather of heavy metal instead found something completely unexpected. Street after street lined with elderly residents holding photos, not of Ozzy the rock star, but of John Michael the neighbor who had been secretly helping their families for decades. Margaret Thompson, the 89-year-old woman who lived next door to the Osbourne family in the 1950s, was holding more than just a childhood photo. She was clutching a bank statement showing monthly deposits of £500 that had been coming for over 15 years, all from an account simply labeled JMO for Maggie's medicine. She wasn't the only one. As fans moved through the procession route, dozens of elderly Birmingham residents came forward with similar stories. Ozzy had been quietly paying medical bills, covering rent for struggling families, and funding repairs for local community centers. All done in complete secrecy, never publicized, never tax-deducted, never mentioned in interviews. But the most shocking discovery came when the procession reached Lodge Road. A group of middle-aged adults were waiting with a banner that read, "Thank you, Uncle Ozzy." These weren't relatives. They were kids from the local children's home where Ozzy had spent part of his troubled youth. What fans discovered was that for over 30 years, every Christmas, every birthday, every school achievement, Ozzy had been sending gifts, cards, and money to the children in that home. The home's former director, Patricia Wells, who had retired in 2018, was there with records going back to 1987. Detailed logs showing not just financial contributions, but personal involvement. Ozzy had been funding a music program at the home, buying instruments, paying for lessons, even arranging for professional musicians to visit and teach the kids. Here's what made this even more incredible. None of the children ever knew it was Ozzy Osbourne. The donations came from Mr. John, and the music teachers were instructed to never mention the famous benefactor. Ozzy didn't want these vulnerable kids to feel like charity cases or to have their privacy invaded by media attention. Sarah Mitchell, now 42 and a music teacher herself, broke down completely when she realized that the guitar lessons that changed her entire life, the scholarship that got her through music college, the mysterious benefactor who believed in her when nobody else did, it was all Ozzy. The man she had spent her teenage years headbanging to was the same man who had been secretly funding her dreams. But the revelation that destroyed everyone emotionally happened when the procession passed Birmingham Children's Hospital. The entire medical staff had lined the route, and they weren't just paying respects. They were revealing the biggest secret of Ozzy's life. Dr. James Forrester, the hospital's head of pediatric oncology, stepped forward with documentation that floored everyone, including Sharon. For 23 years, Ozzy had been making monthly visits to terminally ill children at the hospital. Not publicity visits, not photo opportunities. Secret visits always arranged privately, always kept confidential. The arrangement was simple but heartbreaking. Whenever a child was losing their battle with cancer and had expressed love for music, the hospital would quietly contact Ozzy's office. Within 24 hours, John Michael Osbourne would show up, not as the Prince of Darkness, but as a gentle man who would sit beside hospital beds, hold tiny hands, and sing lullabies. Dr. Forrester revealed that Ozzy had been present for the final moments of over 200 children. He had learned every child's name, remembered their favorite songs, and often stayed with families long after the children had passed, helping them cope with their grief. The most devastating part? Ozzy never told anyone about this, not even Sharon. She found out along with the rest of the world during the funeral procession. The man she had been married to for 4 decades had been living a completely secret life of compassion that contradicted everything his public persona represented. One story broke everyone's hearts. Emma Rodriguez, now 35, was at the procession with her own children. 27 years ago, when she was 8 and dying of leukemia, a strange man with long hair had appeared in her hospital room. He told her his name was John and that he heard she liked to sing. For 3 weeks, while she fought for her life, John visited every day, teaching her songs, bringing her a small keyboard, and promising her that music was magic that could heal anything. Emma survived. She became a nurse specializing in pediatric care, and she had been trying to find John from the hospital for decades to thank him. During the funeral procession, when Dr. Forrester told her story, Emma realized that the mysterious man who saved her spirit during her darkest hours was Ozzy Osbourne. The hospital revelations completely changed how the crowd viewed the funeral procession. These weren't just fans saying goodbye to a rock star. They were witnesses to the unveiling of one of the most significant humanitarian efforts in music history, all done in absolute secrecy. But what happened next at the Black Sabbath Bridge would reveal an even more shocking truth about the man they thought they knew. What happened at the Black Sabbath Bridge at 1:47 p.m. on July 30th, 2025 wasn't in any plan, wasn't coordinated by any publicist, and wasn't something anyone could have predicted. It was the moment that crashed social media platforms worldwide, left 5 million livestream viewers in tears, and broke Sharon Osbourne in a way that 4 decades of chaos, addiction, and illness never could. The funeral procession had reached the bridge where thousands of tributes were laid out like a carpet of love and memories. Sharon, Jack, Kelly, and Amy had stepped out to view the overwhelming display of fan devotion. The Birmingham brass band had fallen silent. 50,000 people were holding their breath in reverence. Everything was going according to the carefully planned tribute. Then from somewhere in the massive crowd came a voice. Not shouting, not screaming, just a clear, strong voice singing the opening lines of Mama, I'm Coming Home. Within seconds, that single voice became 2, then 10, then hundreds, then thousands. But this wasn't the spontaneous Iron Man sing-along that had happened earlier. This was different. This was haunting, beautiful, and completely unexpected. Because the voice that started it all belonged to someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Tony Iommi stepped out from the crowd. The guitarist and founding member of Black Sabbath, the man who had created heavy metal alongside Ozzy over 50 years ago, had flown in from his home without telling anyone he was coming. Not Sharon, not the family, not even his own management. He had simply gotten on a plane from Birmingham Airport that morning, driven to the memorial site, and disappeared into the crowd like any other mourner. But when he heard 50,000 people struggling to find the right way to honor his oldest friend, Tony couldn't stay hidden. He started singing, and his distinctive voice, the voice that had harmonized with Ozzy on countless Black Sabbath recordings, cut through the air like a knife through everyone's heart. Sharon's reaction was immediate and devastating. The woman who had held herself together through Ozzy's overdoses, his affairs, his near-death accidents, his Parkinson's diagnosis, and his final illness, completely crumbled when she heard Tony's voice. She collapsed to her knees right there on the bridge, sobbing so violently that Jack had to physically support her. What the live-stream cameras captured next became one of the most shared moments in internet history. Tony emerged from the crowd, walked straight to Sharon, and knelt beside her on the pavement. For 30 seconds, these two people who had spent decades in legal battles, business disputes, and bitter feuds over money and rights simply held each other and cried. But that's not what broke the internet. What broke the internet was what Tony whispered to Sharon that the microphones picked up. In his thick Birmingham accent, barely audible above the crowd, he said, "Sharon, I need to tell you something Ozzy made me promise never to say." The entire memorial fell silent. 5 million people watching the live stream leaned closer to their screens. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping. In that moment, the whole world was listening to Tony Iommi, and what he said next changed everything. He never stopped loving you, but more than that, he never stopped being grateful. Every time we fought, every time the band broke up, every time lawyers got involved, Ozzy would call me and say the same thing. "Tony, Sharon saved my life, but more importantly, she gave me a life worth saving." He made me promise that if anything happened to him first, I would tell you that every day with you was a gift he never thought he deserved. Sharon's response was barely a whisper, but the microphones caught it. "He never told me that." Tony's voice cracked as he continued. He was going to. He had it all planned for your next anniversary. He had me write it down because his hands were shaking too much. He wanted to renew your vows and tell you everything about the letters to Thelma, about the hospital visits, about why he kept secrets. He said he finally understood that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being grateful enough to try to become the person your partner sees in you. The crowd was silent except for the sound of thousands of people crying. But Tony wasn't finished. There's something else. The last time we talked, 3 days before he died, he told me his biggest regret wasn't the drugs or the drinking or the crazy years. His biggest regret was that he never learned how to tell you he was proud of you. Not grateful to you, not dependent on you, proud of you. Proud of the woman who turned a broken addict into someone worth loving. That's when Sharon lost it completely. She started screaming, not crying, screaming, "Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he tell me?" Over and over until her voice gave out. The moment lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. 4 minutes and 17 seconds that crashed Twitter, overloaded Instagram servers, and caused YouTube to temporarily suspend the live stream due to overwhelming traffic. Mental health helplines across 3 continents reported their highest call volumes ever as viewers struggled to process the raw emotion they had witnessed. But the most shocking part of this moment wasn't what it revealed about Ozzy's feelings. It was what happened immediately afterward that would change the music industry forever and reveal the final secret that would haunt everyone who witnessed it. After Tony Iommi's devastating revelation at the Black Sabbath Bridge, everyone thought they had heard the most shocking truth about Ozzy's final days. They were wrong. What happened next would reveal a discovery so profound, so carefully orchestrated, and so emotionally destructive that it would change not just how we remember the Prince of Darkness, but how the entire music industry operates. In the chaos following Sharon's breakdown, Jack Osbourne made a decision that his mother had forbidden him to make. He pulled out his phone and played a recording that Ozzy had left specifically for this moment, with strict instructions that it should only be heard if Sharon couldn't handle the funeral proceedings on her own. Ozzy's voice, weak but unmistakably his, came through the phone speakers, and somehow, impossibly, the crowd of 50,000 people fell completely silent to listen. If you're hearing this, it means Sharon broke down and Jack had to break his promise to me. Sharon, love, if you're crying right now, stop. I've got something to tell everyone that's going to make you proud, not sad. What followed was a 23-minute recording that revealed the most carefully planned artistic deception in rock history. For the past 5 years, while battling Parkinson's disease and keeping his condition largely secret from the public, Ozzy had been working on something unprecedented. Not an album, not a tour, not a memoir. He had been systematically documenting every act of kindness, every secret donation, every hospital visit, and every anonymous good deed he had performed over his entire career. But here's the twist that shattered everyone's understanding of who Ozzy Osbourne really was. All of those charitable acts, all of those secret visits to sick children, all of those anonymous donations to struggling families, they weren't spontaneous acts of kindness. They were part of a deliberate, lifelong campaign to balance what he called the darkness I put into the world. In his own words from the recording, "People think I'm mad, and maybe I am, but I'm not stupid. I knew that singing about darkness, death, and devils was affecting people. I could see it in their faces, in their letters, in how some fans took the imagery too far. So I made a deal with myself. For every song about darkness, I would bring light into someone's real life. For every devil reference, I would be someone's angel. For every moment I scared someone with my music, I would comfort someone with my heart." The recording revealed that Ozzy had kept detailed journals of this balance system for over 40 years. He had calculated that his music contained approximately 2,847 references to dark themes, supernatural evil, and frightening imagery across all his albums. In response, he had documented exactly 2,847 acts of kindness, charity, and comfort. When he sang Mr. Crowley, he anonymously funded a church renovation. When he released Shot in the Dark, he paid for streetlights in a dangerous Birmingham neighborhood. When he sang Diary of a Madman, he quietly sponsored mental health counseling for struggling musicians. Every single time. The most haunting part of the recording was Ozzy explaining why he never wanted anyone to know about this system. If people knew I was trying to balance the darkness, they'd think it was just publicity. But it was never about looking good. It was about sleeping at night knowing that even if my music inspired someone to do something dark, I had also inspired someone else to receive something light. But the revelation that broke everyone wasn't about the charitable acts themselves. It was about what Ozzy had planned for after his death. He had left specific instructions that all of his secret charitable work should be continued through a trust fund he had been building for decades. The fund, which Sharon didn't even know existed, contained over $73 million. But here's where it gets shocking. The money wasn't just his. Ozzy had been secretly contacting every musician, producer, and industry figure who had ever worked on his dark-themed songs, explaining his balance system and asking them to contribute anonymously to the fund. Not just Black Sabbath members, but session musicians, sound engineers, album cover artists, even the people who designed his stage shows. The recording revealed that over 400 people in the music industry had been secretly participating in Ozzy's balance system for years, contributing money and time to counteract what they all worried their art might inspire. From Tony Iommi to Randy Rhoads' estate to the designer of the Bark at the Moon werewolf costume, all of them had been part of this hidden network of musical philanthropy. The fund's final purpose was the most shocking element of all. Ozzy had left instructions that after his death, the money should be used to create something called the Light Program, a global initiative that would identify young people showing signs of being negatively influenced by dark music themes and provide them with mentorship, counseling, and positive outlets for their anger and depression. But here's the part that has the music industry questioning everything. Ozzy's recording revealed that he had contacted lawyers and was planning to challenge the entire concept of artistic responsibility. He was going to argue in court that musicians have a legal and moral obligation to counterbalance any potentially harmful content they create. His plan was to start a movement requiring all artists who produce dark, violent, or disturbing content to contribute to programs that help people deal with the real-world effects of that content. Essentially, he was going to try to revolutionize how the music industry handles the impact of art on society. The recording ended with Ozzy's final message. "I spent my whole career being called the Prince of Darkness, and I accepted that title because I thought it was just entertainment. But when I started getting letters from kids who were cutting themselves to my music, from parents whose children committed suicide with my songs playing, I realized that being the Prince of Darkness came with responsibilities I had never considered. So I decided to also become something else, something secret, something that could never be taken away by critics or destroyed by controversy. I became someone's anonymous guardian angel again and again and again." The most chilling part of his final message was his prediction. The industry is going to fight this idea because it means they'll have to take responsibility for their art. But after I'm gone, they won't be able to ignore it anymore because I'm leaving behind proof that it can be done. The impact of this revelation has been immediate and devastating. Record labels are panicking, artists are questioning their own catalogs, and mental health organizations are reporting unprecedented offers of support from musicians who never cared about these issues before. Ozzy's death wasn't just the end of a musical legend. It was the beginning of a complete transformation of how the music industry understands its responsibility to society. If this hidden side of Ozzy's story shocked you as much as it did his own family, smash that like button and subscribe. Because what I'm about to reveal in the next video about what Sharon found in his private studio will completely destroy everything you thought you knew about heavy metal's biggest legend.